from the public perspective, obviously it was brutal. You're checking out at the grocery stand, you see your mugshot, you turn on the news and it's like arrested again. That was very debilitating, especially at a very young age, 18, 19, 20 years old when you're going through that, like this, your self-worth obviously went very, very low.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Addiction Unlimited podcast, where you get to learn everything you want to know about addiction and recovery. I'm your host, Angela Pugh, co-founder of Kansas City Recovery, life coach, and recovering alcoholic. To learn more about me, you can listen to episode 0 on your podcast app or find us on the web at addictionunlimited.com. All right, Jason, thank you so much for coming on and doing this show with me. It's such a pleasure to meet you, especially after watching you on television for so long.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Grateful to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we start with just tell everybody a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay, so today, my name is Jason. I live in Franklin, Tennessee, and I am an advocate for mental health and addiction. I work with Dr. Daniel Amen at the Change Your Brain Foundation. I'm actually the director there. I work with A-List Health as a brand ambassador, which is the first ever JCO accredited at-home treatment provider. And I also work with SoberSure, which is the first ever transdermal alcohol monitoring detection program. So kind of have my hands in a little bit of everything. I do a lot of speaking, basically to share my experience and my truths and try to be a beacon of hope for those that are lost.
Yeah, isn't it crazy how life can change when you get sober?
Yeah, I mean, I was just reflecting this morning at Bible study with a group of the guys, and it's just amazing how your greatest deficits can become your greatest assets, and just how, for me, God kind of had me go through what I went through, not knowing where it was going to take me, because I can tell you the last thing in the world I ever thought I was going to do or be when I was growing up was somebody in recovery and or advocating against alcoholism or mental health. And but it's incredible. Half my family struggles with addiction. They're pre-genetically disposed. We are. I'm Cherokee, German, and Irish. Should have had a stamp on the forehead when I came out of the womb. It says do not allow him to use. But it's been amazing. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. And since I got sober, 8 of my family members have gotten sober. And I'm not saying that's because of me. I think it's attraction rather than promotion, right? But they had to do the work. And so just leading the charge on that, and some amazing opportunities and amazing things have come from that. And, it's scary. It's literally, you look at addiction and overdoses, mental health, suicides. It's the leading cause of death in America for 50-year-old individuals and younger. And, it's average age first-time use, 11 and a half years old. When you look at this, it's something that it's really scary. And the times have changed. The landscape is different than when I think myself or you were using. It wasn't that we'd have to worry about if we were taking something, if it was going to be laced and we're going to be dead, like it is today. And so I think the more that we can talk about it, the more light that we can bring to it, the better. By expressing vulnerability, it creates humility to let people know that they're not alone. And it creates a sense of safety and community for people.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I love that you just said is like not knowing where the journey would take you. Like you couldn't have looked this far forward in your life so many years ago and been able to say, this is what I'm going to be doing and this is what my life is going to look like. And I think that's important because it's the same way, like sobriety in general. So many of like my clients are always sitting at, day 7 trying to figure out what they're going to do about a party or a wedding 9 months from now. And I'm like, dude, you're going to be such a different human being. You can't, there's no way you can know. Like when I got sober, I'll be 19 in January. And when I got sober, like podcasts didn't even exist. I couldn't know I was going to have one of the biggest addiction podcasts in the freaking world. Like you can't tell the future. Like you just have to show up and let the opportunities present themselves and just keep showing up. You can't figure it all out.
No, the best of my decision making kept getting me back to the places I didn't want to go. Right. And so when you really get to a place of surrender and being having a willingness to take direction, it's amazing what comes to fruition. It really is. And so I attribute a lot of that, my sobriety. It was the first thing is just getting open and honest, but then just that willingness. And it's been crazy to see how this has all turned into what it's turned into for me. I have a life that's incredible. I have a wife, I have kids, I'm a good friend, I'm accountable, I'm trustworthy. It's funny, you look back when you're using, it's like you're all the opposite of that stuff. And so it's truly incredible. It is really a gift, it really is.
Yeah, for sure. How old were you when you knew that your relationship with substance was different? Because I think you were alcohol, right? Alcohol primarily first or whatever. I am kind of strictly a drunk. Like I never did drugs. I never wanted to do drugs. I don't like being high. I am really a true to core alcoholic. So, um, how old were you when you first recognized like this is different for me than it is for other people?
I mean, probably. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, looking back, I can see my relationship with alcohol was was bad from the start, right? But
Yeah.
and it was primary, it was chronic, and it was progressive. That's for sure. But I'd say like, I was like, God, maybe do I have an issue? Do I not? Probably like around 20. Because in
Hmm.
the beginning it was like, yeah, I mean, even though I went to wilderness, I went to wilderness program, I went to boarding school. I was also like, I'm just kind of going through it. I'm under a microscope. I feel like everybody my age is, I'm just getting caught basically. I feel like other people are
Right.
struggling too. And I didn't really take a look at it, but I remember like at 20, just being like, hey, I think I probably have an issue with this. And I think that's where some of the acceptance started to come in. That doesn't mean I stopped.
Yeah.
But I definitely, could identify that something was different than other people. And it just became more and more clear as I got older because, it was another 3 years before I actually really entered into recovery, July 23rd, 2010. Um, and, I had to get beaten up pretty bad for me to really understand that. And that's what's crazy about addiction, dude, is like looking back. I mean, I was able to justify after, there was so many arrests, I went to 12 different treatment centers from Florida to Hawaii and every state in between. But like how you could just say, I don't have a problem. Like even when I knew that there was an issue, it's like how time will do that to you. I don't have a problem. Like that was in the past. I'll do things differently again. You know what I mean? And then lo and behold, it comes back up and bites you.
I think conceptually, it's really challenging to understand that you can't control like a liquid in your glass, right? Like that's really hard to understand that you can't muster up enough willpower, self discipline, or commitment to control it. I mean, it's hard, it's weird.
It is. It's bizarre. I mean, because I'll never forget when I was talking to my dad. He's just like, I don't understand why you can't stop, right? And this is like in the earlier stages of it. And I remember after getting a little bit of time of sobriety, we reapproached that question. I was like, Dad, the only thing I could think of to try to explain to somebody that's a normie for you to be able to understand. And this is an example. Some people may think it's silly or ridiculous, but like the way that it takes over your mind, right? Like the way that addiction takes over your frontal cortex and like literally your executive operating system, it makes you not be able to make decisions is the same thing. Like when you have to go to the restroom really bad, like think when you're in the car, right? And you're driving down the road and like you have to go to the restroom really bad. And that's all you're thinking about. You don't care about anything. You're taking off your seatbelt, you're driving. And like, but that same mentality, right? Or it's just that one thing that's in your head, like relate that to, going to the restroom or, having to go to the bathroom towards your substance. And when I told that to my dad, he's like, oh my God, I was actually able to kind of understand what you're saying. Like, why can't you stop? Because it's literally like a survival gene. It just takes over.
Yeah, a
And,
thousand percent.
and
It's
the other
survival mode.
it's like, or if you're dying of thirst, right? Like when you're working out or you're outside and you're hiking and you're just like dying of thirst, that's like all you're thinking about. For like normies that are out there, think of that feeling, like, but translate that for an addict towards their substance. Like that's the closest thing I've been able to kind of come up with to create a relatability to it. And it's been helpful for some people to kind of understand that really can't comprehend, like, hey, how come you like just don't pick it up? But it's like when you're in active addiction, like you lose that right to make that decision. So
Hmm.
I don't know if that resonates or you understand what I'm trying to say, but that was an example I gave my pops that he's like, well, that really makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I love the term normie, but I always say, I'm like, listen, there's nothing normal about those people. Like, they just have
Well,
different struggles.
yes,
But
correct,
there's nothing normal about any of us, really.
correct. You say that again. That's true. What is normal?
And also, when you're telling that story, I was envisioning the pee-pee dance. You know what I mean? Like you have to go so bad.
Yeah.
But it takes over every part of you and that's all you're focused on and it's all you can think about. I mean, yeah, that's a great analogy for
Well,
sure.
I'd be there sitting, drinking, crying, saying I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, how does that resonate? And it's like it doesn't make sense. I mean, that's the insanity behind it.
Yeah. But I say that to families too, because of course, everybody says the same stuff. And they're like, I just don't understand why they keep doing it. And I'm like, listen, we don't really understand either. It's not, we're not making a choice. This is another thing I hear a lot of families say. It's like, oh, he or she is choosing to get drunk over being a mother or a father or whatever. And I'm like, that's not a choice that we're making. That's not how we think about it. That's not what's happening for us. I'm
Yeah.
not sitting there going, oh, here's my family and here's alcohol. You know what? F those people. I'm just going to go get drunk. Like, that's not what's happening for us.
Yeah, no, 100. And I think that's the thing is anybody in their right mind would not be choosing, the substance over their family. And that's the insanity behind it too. There's no such thing as recreational use of heroin or drinking a bottle of vodka a day or shooting up fentanyl or shooting up meth. Like, I mean, you can try to argue that, but for me, it's like somebody that's in a pretty miserable state of existence and they're just trying to get by, right? I'm not justifying for them, but addiction doesn't dictate who we are, but it doesn't justify our actions. There's got to be ownership and accountability. But when you really look at that, like it's like for me, I mean, you look at the amount of harm and the people I hurt through that whole process. It wasn't like I woke up, I'm like, I can't wait to screw up these relationships today. Right.
Right.
And, I didn't wake up and choose to be, or want to be an alcoholic, and destroy my life and have to go through what I went through. Like, again, on the flip side, I'm very grateful for where I'm at, but I just sure as hell don't want to have to do that again.
For
Or I wouldn't
sure.
want to do it again.
And you do. I mean, I get that, being grateful for it. I definitely, I had a pretty tragic rock bottom moment and I crashed my car at 70 miles an hour. I hit another car. I thought I killed that guy.
Uh,
Thankfully, I was the only person hurt. But, it was crazy. And none of that was easy. It wasn't easy to be that person. Like, a drunk driver is the most hated person on the planet.
yeah.
And having to reconcile that, and that's who you are. And telling your family. And I mean, none of those things are easy. None of that is easy to get through and to figure out and process. But I'm with you. Like, I would not change a second of it, because I get to be a person today that I never even thought I was capable of. And I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for sobriety, 12 steps, my sponsor, like even the community I've created myself. Like, it takes every single piece of it, the good and the bad, to get to be the person you really want to be.
No, 100%. I mean, that's the beauty of this. I think sobriety for me, the greatest gift that came out of this whole process was really an ability to get to know myself. I'd lost sight of who I was for so long. I mean, growing up, I was a person that was outdoors. I was active. I loved surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, playing baseball, you name it. I mean, just that was who I was. And then, just in the matter of 4 to 5 years, I was in complete isolation and completely not doing anything that I loved, lost a lot of the good friends that I had around me, the relationships. And, it takes everything from you, and
Yeah.
it is a very cunning, baffling, and powerful disease. And, but again, as I'm grateful for where we're at, because again, when I struggled, back in even like the 90s, early 2000s, like you go back to just the education and the knowledge and the research that we had on addiction, it was very limited compared to what we have now. Right. I remember trying to explain to my therapist, 12, 13 years old, like, having severe OCD and struggling with that. Like, I didn't know how to express or talk about that or even know
Yeah.
where to start. Right. And so, and even on their side, it was back then, it was just, hey, let's, it sounds like you got OCD. Let's give you some medication. Let's help mitigate the symptoms and have you be on your way. And lo and behold, that was a start to me, with the depression and anxiety comes from that. And then, the self-loathing and the insecurities and all the other things. And I find alcohol and I'm like, dude, who needs medication? This is the go-to. So, again, that was kind of how everything, started. But it's amazing to see the progress we've made within this. Unfortunately, addiction and stuff is obviously getting younger and younger, and people are experiencing it at a much younger age. But at least we are having more knowledge. There's a lot more therapeutic modalities and a lot more resources and tools for people to be able to get help than there was, even just 15 years ago. 20, I mean, there were such cookie cutter models of treatment.
Yeah.
And there's definitely not a one size fits all. I mean, how I got sober, I mean, yeah, we may have similar backgrounds or similar stories to a degree, but how it affected me and how, I ended up maintaining or getting sober could look different than you,
Yeah.
And so I think having, a very individual approach to a lot of that is imperative. Unfortunately, it's obviously fortunately more cost effective or cost efficient. It costs more. It's not more cost efficient to be able to do that, but you definitely see the benefits that come from that versus trying to stick 20 or 30 people into a place and it's like, okay, everybody try to get sober this way.
Yeah.
Um, it's there's a reason there's a high recidivism.
Yeah, for sure. I feel really fortunate when I got sober in 2006, and right shortly after I got sober, I don't remember exactly how long, but I think it was probably my first year. They had like some major breakthroughs in the brain science of addiction, right? Like really nailing down the genetic components and things like that. And it was such a beautiful piece of my recovery because I am a very science based thinker. I am a very logical person. I'm not a very emotional person. And when I started exploring the brain pieces and all this new research was coming out, for me, it was the first time I felt like I was fixable,
Yeah.
right? I didn't just feel like I was defective. I was like, oh, shit, okay. And if I do XYZ, like if I understand it from a brain perspective and how my brain functions, then I can take actions that will support my brain supporting me, and then we're really making long-term changes,
Yeah.
and it just happened to be, I just happened to get sober at that time when all of the stuff was coming out, so it was a higher power moment for me, for sure, that was my perfect mode of thinking, and it was just sort of dropped in my lap at the perfect time, but game changing. And then also even in my own programs and helping people, that is the stuff that I rely on the most. But you're right. Like it has been beautiful in the last 10 years, especially. Like so much more stuff has come out and there's such a greater understanding. And I'm obsessed with Dr. Amen. Like I love that you're doing that. Me and a bunch of my clients are talking about doing a group thing. We're all
Good.
going to descend on the Amen Clinic
Yeah.
and do our brain scans. But yeah, it has changed so much.
Well, knowledge is power, right? I mean, I think the more that you can understand and comprehend around what it is that you're going through, the better opportunity you're going to have to fix those issues. And since I got sober, and as we get older, right, like I didn't realize how much like sleep, or your gut, how much it correlates with your brain health, and just like all these things that growing up, especially being young when you're active and things like that, it's just kind of like you go about your days. But it's like I really have the negative, impacts of just eating too much pasta, or how it will ruin my whole next day, or just if I don't get enough sleep, how I'll get brain fog and my OCD will get worse. Like there's all these little things that I'm starting to see because I'm in touch with my body and I'm able to understand that. Just with all the travel that was coming up, it was like, God, there's pure exhaustion. And I mean, I thrive when I have consistency and structure really creates safety for me. And when I'm thrown off of my routine, it changes and diverts. And so I don't know. I just think it's one of those things that's obviously important to address and to talk about.
What would you say is the most baffling thing about addiction to you? Like now that you have sobriety and recovery, you have such a greater understanding of it all. Like when you look at addiction as a whole, not only your own, but just, addiction's pretty predictable it kind of behaves the same in everybody. Our details are different, but its progression is kind of the same. Like what is most baffling to you when you look at all of it?
I mean, there's two things. It's like the insanity that goes into it, right? And just and what people, when you're active in your disease, like what you will do for your addiction is crazy. When you're on the outside, like it's almost like looking at a snow globe, right? And you're shaking it up and you're watching it, and to see like when somebody's active in it, just like it's just like, oh my gosh, man, like it's so clear from our perspective. Like
Right.
when they're in it, it's so chaotic, but really is how much the family system gets affected. That is to me probably the most untreated area, and I believe that's why there's still I feel like there's a lot of people out there that are sick, because I always say wherever there's an alcoholic or an addict, there's a codependent, and sometimes they're just as sick if not sicker. And so when it comes down to that, like I think that family dynamic, and now there I help a lot of people that reach out, and it's a lot of parents that will reach out for their kids, and wives, you name it, and it's crazy to like be on this other side now, especially as I've gotten older, right? Like, because when I was younger and I was so like, when I was in my early 20s, mid 20s, and, I'd often talk to another young man or something like that, and I would connect with him. But now that I'm getting older and I'm talking to parents and seeing the dynamic with kids and spouses and others in the family, it's so clear how manipulative and how intertwined. But again, it's also too, it's like, these parents aren't wanting to, they're wanting to help and support, right? But they don't know. Sometimes they're where they think they're helping and supporting, they're actually causing more harm than good.
Yeah.
Throwing pillows where they shouldn't be thrown, and not staying in their lane. There's a lot of parents that I've run into that think they're the doctor, the psychiatrist, the therapist, the case manager. They're ASAM certified doctors. I mean, it's just like, you just need to be mom and dad. You need to allow others to be able to help and provide and support you, just as if you're a developer or a contractor. I'm not going to try to tell you how to build a house, right? Like, it's flipping the script. And I think when you can kind of paint that, but it allows it for a healthy relationship for the individuals to get back. It's like, hey, mom and dad, or whoever it is, right? You go in your lane, the other person stay in their lane, have somebody that can help bridge that gap and start creating clear and effective communication, because, there's oftentimes you need just as much help, just because it's that's why you call it a family disease, though, because it's just, you get wrapped up in it, and it
changes everybody. Mm-hmm. I mean, as a parent or a sibling or a spouse, like, if you look at who you were before your person struggled with addiction and who you are by the time they're going to treatment, you're a very different human too. And you can't just send your person off. I say this all the time doing interventions. I'm like, listen, you want to send your person off to treatment, and then you want them to come back and go to meetings every day and dedicate their whole life to being sober, and you want to sit back and do nothing. But it doesn't, you can't send them off to treatment and have them come home to the same broken system. Like, everybody's got to get help. At the very least, you have to learn how to communicate. You have to learn how to set healthy boundaries. I walked in I own men's sober living too. And I walked in my sober house, one of them, probably 2 months ago, and a mom is like literally sitting on the couch filling out a job application for her son who is 27. I was like, what are you doing right now? And I said to her, I was like, are you looking for a job? And she goes, no, it's for him. I go, stop right now. Just stop right now. You cannot do that. That is his work to do. Let him do it.
I mean, that's again, as you get wrapped up in that, and it's like, honestly, and I would be willing to, I mean, there's a lot of people that think that they're really helping and supporting in that area, where it's like you're stopping the progression of growth for that person. Yeah.
Well, you don't want people you love to be in pain, right? Certainly if it's your child, like, nobody can sit back and just let their child suffer. I mean, that's horrible. But it's doing such a great disservice by trying to handle their life skills for them. It's like, I needed to mess up all those things when I was young. I moved to LA at 20 years old, like $65 in my pocket. Like, I had to do that stuff. Those were my choices to make, my mistakes to make. I needed to dig my way out of whatever drama and chaos I created. But I had to go through all of that. Like, I know you want to protect them, but you have to let them screw things up and dig their way out too. That's how they believe in themselves.
Well, I mean, you're right, 100%. But I mean, from a growth perspective, identity, purpose, passion, I mean, all of those things, I think we're like in an identity crisis with the younger population, just not knowing who or what it is that they want to do. And when you have those, again, when they're specifically with the job application, it's just like that. How's that person going to be motivated to have any type of purpose or passion? Because I think that's a huge part, especially for me when I got sober, especially after all the TV stuff and, kind of living a very falsified life, right? I mean, it was a trip how I went through everything, but it was not your traditional 18, 19, 20-year-old person's life. But then when I got a job and actually having, somebody to report to, having accountability, like, being relied on, like that, all those things gave me motivation, and it helped me. It really helped me, like that was, I tell people, like, that first job I got was so imperative for me, like just in my developmental and my growth within my sobriety, because it gave me a motivation to wake up, and it really gave me something to look forward to. And then when you make your own money, like, again, it's like the money I was making before was it was not real money, right? It was just, it was, at least in the way I looked at it, versus like actually working your butt off and making a paycheck. That was a very, very instrumental part of my early stages of recovery.
Yeah. I can't imagine going through all of this stuff in such a public way too. Like I say all the time, like, I am so freaking grateful. When I got sober, like, texting was even brand new. You know what I mean? There were no camera phones. Like, I am so freaking grateful. There's no proof,
You're
like,
lucky.
I
I don't
know.
have that.
I know. And I think that, like, listen, I always thought about that too, like with, people who you've watched struggle, Lindsay Lohan, or, there are some big people that you've really watched struggle, and it's heartbreaking because not only are you going through all of the internal parts of that, but then you have to listen to the whole freaking world weigh in on your mistakes and your behavior and judging you on the worst moments of your life. And I feel like that creates so much bigger barriers to overcome to really get it together. Not to mention being, kind of surrounded by yes people a lot, right? Like you definitely, when you're in that position, you've got a lot of enablers.
Yep, 100%. It's interesting that you bring that up, like from the public perspective. Obviously, it was brutal. Like you're checking out at the grocery stand, you see your mugshot,
Right.
just on a magazine, or you turn on the news and it's like arrested again. That was very debilitating, especially at a very young age, 18, 19, 20 years old, when you're going through that. Like this, your self-worth obviously went very, very low. But I think also on the flip side, like I'm grateful for that, and like I try to look at a positive in these situations, because one is it held me to a higher level of accountability when I got sober. Number one, but two is it allotted me the opportunity to be very open and vulnerable through my story, because had all that been behind closed doors, the way I was raised and just different things, I don't know that I would have been so public about it. And again, is obviously if the show wasn't out, there wouldn't be an opportunity to be public about it. But even just behind, just in my own town, my small town, I don't know that I would have shared the way I did. So it kind of really created this path that was, that allotted this opportunity, because people all the time are like, dude, how are you just so open about, like, you talk about like your suicide, you talk about all that. I'm just like, unfortunately, I don't really have the opportunity to hide it. You know what I mean? It's out there. So it's now on my end. It's like, I know there's a lot of people that are out there that are struggling. Like when the Hills came back in 2019 and 20 and 21, we were shooting, like, I thought I was the only person when I relapsed, was at the first floor at Hoag Hospital while his wife was giving birth on the fourth floor. Like, I can't tell you when we shared that, like how many people reached out. I'm like, holy cow. You know what I mean? Like even from that, not thinking that we're special, but it was just, I cannot believe the relatability from that. And so like the more that I see, the more that I've been able to share in these areas, it's like, hey, how can you connect with people? How can you share your experience, strength, and hope, and be able to connect with somebody else? Because there's somebody out there that's struggling, that, if you can just connect to that and know that they're not alone. I mean, that's an opportunity for them to have growth.
I always thought it was so important, being part of 12 steps. And of course, I respect the anonymity of it. I respect all the things of the program. For me, I never wanted to be anonymous about my recovery. One, because it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Yep.
And I thought it was such a beautiful process. And having those rooms to go to was such an absolute savior for me. And I wanted everybody to know about it. I was like, because people think it's weird. And I'm like, we're not weird. We're the same idiots that you were drunk at the bar with. We're just in a different room now, but we're the same people that you were drinking with and partying with and doing all the debauchery with. We're the same people. We're just in a different room now, and we drink really bad coffee. But that's the only difference, So I always wanted to be very out and proud, so to speak, because it is important. It was also, my sponsor always drove into me that sense of responsibility of being available for the next person, and he's like, Angela, you don't keep going to meetings because you feel like you need to keep going to meetings. He said, you need to be in meetings for the next young woman that's walking in the door that needs to see somebody that looks like her with a smile on her face and living her best life. That's why you have your butt in that chair. So I thought the same thing through my whole recovery, like how I talked about it to everybody. And I was a bartender when I got sober. Like I would go to AA at noon. I would go to work that night and I'd tell everybody at the bar what I learned in AA that day. Like, this is what we talked about. I mean, I did not have a quiet moment of my recovery. I was just so proud and so grateful. And I wanted, just like you're saying, you want to help as many people as you possibly can because you know how heavy that monster is.
Well, it's like if you don't share and you don't open up, you don't have to talk about the 12 steps in that. Like, it's just about your
Sure.
own story, right? I mean, how do you create systemic change? You got to bring awareness to it. I mean,
Yeah.
the first thing is awareness. And if you're, I think that's the reason why I see the benefit in sharing, is bringing light to it, right? And so it's important for me.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Yeah.
different folks, different folks.
Absolutely.
But like I
Absolutely.
said, I also, going back to the initial question and talking about it from like the public standpoint, is I didn't really have a choice though.
Yeah.
I was kind of forced. So
Yeah.
that's why maybe it's so easy for me. And some people are like, I don't understand how you do it, because maybe I would have been different about it if I wasn't on television and I didn't walk through everything that I walked through. So, but that's not my story. So I'm here talking about it.
You mentioned seeing your mugshot a few minutes ago. I heard you say that you had a framed mugshot that you
Oh,
kept in a
yeah.
drawer as a reminder. And this really resonated with me because I have my sweater that I was wearing the night that I crashed my car. Because I busted my nose and my skull was cracked in a couple places and I was just pouring blood, right? So I have this sweater that's covered in blood. And I have saved it all these years. Like, it literally sits in a clear box in my garage, where every time I pull in my garage, I can see that sweater in that box. And
Oh,
I have
man.
always kept it because I just don't want to forget, right? I hear people say all the time, well, I forgot how bad it was and I drank again. I'm like, I'm almost 19. I can't forget how bad it was. There's not a second that I forget how bad it was. And if my brain ever gets an idea to forget how bad it was, I want that sweater right there. Do you
No,
still have your framed mugshot?
no, no. No, but it was when I was younger. I mean, there was a moment where I was arrested 4 times in 4 different states in 6 months, and it was
Overachiever, like a good alcoholic.
well. Then I ended up throwing in a country in there, so it made it real bad. But there was one arrest that was just like, it was brutal, and I called it my Mel Gibson mugshot. Just like total bloodshot eyes, just so angry. And I kept that thing in my toothbrush drawer, just as a reminder, because it was after I'd gotten a little bit of time. I needed that constant reminder, and every time I brush my teeth a couple times a day, so it was just right in there. I'd open it up and I'd see it in there, and made it through another day. Or when I was starting my day, obviously, okay, we're gonna go about today and do what I need to do, and start off with my recovery program that I have outlined. And then at the end of the day, is just a good reminder for me. And I had that thing in there for a year or two, and it was something that, as I got older and I started to get more mature in my sobriety, it would not hurt to have had it there. But I've also moved a couple times, and I kind of
Right,
got to a
right.
place where it's like the picture had graduated. And but like I said, it's unfortunate that photo hasn't gone away permanently. I mean, I still see it here and there, and when people talk about it, and but again, it's a great tool. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that helped me. It helped me get to that first year of sobriety, and so I highly recommend. Good reminders. It's important not to dwell on it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's a difference of looking at it as an example and an understanding and a learning opportunity versus sitting there and dwelling on it, because I used to sulk in a lot of the negativity and the bad times, and that would keep me sick. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but that was where I was like, I'm going to flip the script here, and I'm going to be like, look, the rearview mirror is obviously smaller for a reason. I'm going to have that there as a reminder, be able to talk about it, but the windshield's big for a reason, and I'm going to look forward. And times get difficult, or things, that's just a quick place that I know I can turn to and have a reminder of where this goes.
Yeah. What would you say is a big mistake that you have made in sobriety that you learned from?
Mm, it's a really good question. A big mistake. I'd say like one of the things that I still like. I mean, I still see a therapist on a weekly basis, right? Is I have a big heart, and I like to help a lot, and it's boundaries for me. Being
Mm-hmm.
able to set boundaries for myself, because I want to help wherever I can. And so it's like the overcommitting and burnout is something that I've learned, like, through sobriety. There's months, and even longer months, that I'll do really well, but then it's like, even just looking at this last month and a half, it's just like it has been nonstop, right? And I could have done
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more outlining and structuring of my schedule, and it's getting better and better. But I think that's something that's like that was that's why I don't work in the day to day of like treatment anymore and stuff like that, because I
Yeah.
would just give everything I have. And that's, I mean, even when I'd relapsed, I mean, I literally can look you dead in the eyes. It was like I was dying trying to help other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was not good. So I mean, I've had to learn and understand what works for me. Because I just, like I said, when I love something, I go both feet in. You know, and
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how I am. And there's amazing benefits and amazing pros that come with that, but there's also cons. And so I think it's something, as I'm, approaching my late 30s and going into these things, it's like I am getting more efficient at compartmentalizing structure. I have, I have the right type of support now and help to be able to help me get through those things. But I think that was one of those things that was, it was the over committing to burnout, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and that it was over committing that would create burnout, which is not a good place to be as a person that struggles with addiction.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned relapse. When you look back on your relapse, I always talk about, there are 3 stages of relapse. And the first one is mental, right? It starts in our thoughts long before I would ever have a drink in my hand.
You
I would be thinking about it, right? You're in relapse mode. So when you look back on your relapse, like, and I don't know all the details of it, but how much earlier did the relapse start than when you actually used?
I always say, I love that you brought that up, because I say relapse is not a part of recovery; it's actually a lack thereof. And so
Yeah.
you relapse way before you ever pick up the drink or the drug. And so it happened months before. I mean, it was basically everything that I had done to get to where I was at, I ended up stopped doing. Right. And I
Yeah.
mean, so I look at that and I go back and it's like, I could have done this, I could have done this, I could have done this, I could have done this. And that goes back out to the thing though. It's like I started, life got really good.
Hmm.
Was doing everything that I needed to do to get there. And then it's like, if you look, like I was going up this uphill and then like everything started to fall off, and as I was going down, and I could see what's predictable is preventable. Right. And so like, I
Yes.
mean, that's like the whole thing there. And that's why I go back to this, the consistency and structure creates safety for me. I need to have that routine. I need to have that for me. I operate much better in that state of mind. But yeah, I could see months before, and
Yeah.
it's the mannerisms. It's like I tell the people I work with on a daily basis. It's like, hey, look, it's one thing to have a couple dominoes fall. If you fall short, if you lie here, you're aggressive towards somebody, you have road rage. It's like, hey, when you take an inventory at the end of the day and you clean up your wreckage, it's much easier at the end if you have a couple to pick up and you can take ownership, accountability, and make amends in that day versus weeks of that happening. You got 40 dominoes that have fallen. It's a lot harder to pick
Right.
all those up, right? And I try to use visual analogies for things like that, and that was for me where those things would happen. It was like, dude, shit, I'm already too deep now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that's where that real shift had happened for me, because like that's one of my favorite things that I do at the end of the day is not only in the morning I have my routine and I do my daily devotional, I read the Bible, I have my gratitude list I send to a few people, and not only what I'm grateful for but why. Exercise is a huge part of what I do, especially
Hmm.
nutrition as well. And so, but at the end of the day is oftentimes we talk about doing an inventory, and I do that, which the things where I fell short and the things I need to do and make right, but also identify the things I did well. And I do like it's beyond a gratitude. It's just kind of like a giving myself grace list as well. Because what that does though is when I hit my head to the pillow, it allows me to have a completely fresh day the next day.
Yeah.
So it's looking at where I've done well and also looking where I've fallen short. And it's a look, it's always a work in progress. There's no perfection to this. Balance is a mirage. There's no such thing
Yeah.
as a perfect balance. It's like, instead of my life being like this, how do I just get it to kind of like ebb and flow? Right. And
Yeah.
so once I've accepted that, it's been really, really helpful. But I want to ask you real quick, because I really like that question. What was, about going back to what is the biggest thing, like what's the biggest mistake you've made in sobriety, or that you've, yeah, I guess that's how you stated it, right? What's the biggest mistake?
Yeah. I think I stayed stuck for so long in old behaviors in certain ways, right? And I guess it probably wasn't stuck as much as you can only grow up as fast as you can grow up. But I had a very underground lifestyle for a long time. I mean, I was a bartender. I was bartending all over Hollywood and Beverly Hills, and I was living that life and going to all the right parties and working in all the hot spots. Um, and it was phenomenal. It was also very dysfunctional and very irresponsible. And and underground, right? I worked opposite hours the rest of the world. Back then, because I'm, like 125 years old now, back then it was very much, it was still a cash business. So there's a lot of bad habits you pick up with that.
Yeah,
and,
I get it.
and so in my sobriety, like really coming out of the underground lifestyle was super challenging for me. I spent more time in bars the first half of my adult life than I spent in my house, right? Because I worked in bars and then I would go out in bars. So that was hard for me to give up. I bartended many years into my sobriety also because it's all I had ever done. I didn't have any skills. I'm feral. I'm not domesticated, right? I couldn't just go get a job. I'd never had a job. I still have never had a job.
Yeah.
So I've always worked for myself. So yeah, those were the things that kind of held me back a lot, but it wasn't that I was in denial or ignoring. I just kind of didn't know. Like I said, you can only grow up as fast as you can grow up. But I caused myself a lot of drama
Yeah.
being financially very irresponsible because I always made so much money. I never had to think about money. And I was the typical person, right? That I'd be like, oh, I want this new Louis Vuitton bag. Like, I'll get the bag instead of paying rent, but it's no big deal. I'll make the money up this weekend. Like I never had to grow up in so many ways. And so when I got sober, that created a lot of challenges for me. I was 2 years sober and had a car repossessed. I had lost my job. I moved from LA to Kansas City and, I made 1/5 the money I was used to making. I actually had more bills, which nobody could say leaving LA but me. Like it caused me a lot of chaos.
Yeah. So true.
I would love for you to talk about, because I heard you talk about also body image issues. And
Hmm.
this is something that God, I wish more men would talk about it because that is not the norm, right? Like nobody's surprised when women have body image issues. I definitely have body dysmorphia and struggle with that and always have. The first time I ever heard a man talk about body dysmorphia or body image issues, I did an intervention on an NFL player, and he was the first person the first man that I had ever heard really speak about, like, this is what was going on for me, and this is what was in my head, and what I was really struggling with, that really pushed him to self-medicate with substance, right? But what a crazy thing, like such a high-functioning athletic person to have some of those struggles. But I really appreciate that you have spoken about it, and I'd love for you to touch on that and how it's kind of affected your journey.
No, I mean, I think through that process, it was really brought back to attention when, it was after relapsing, getting sober again, then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm going to be back on television. It's like, oh my God, so then it's like you start to put yourself under the microscope yourself and you start to see like, okay, well, like, I should be 185 pounds. I'm 210 pounds. Like, it's just all those things. And it's just the things that start racking in your head. And it was like, it was a part of the process of even like wanting to go back on the show. Right. And I was not even wanting to do that until I was advised by other people like, hey, look, this is a really good opportunity to like show like what your life does look like. Even though you had a relapse, that doesn't discredit the other 5 years that you had and everything
That's right.
you walked through. And I was like, that's really true. So, I mean, it was walking through that there. I mean, there was just a lot of anxiety and depression around just where I was at. And as you get older, your body changes. Right. And so I was at a place where, after coming out of that relapse and stuff, you don't really realize what you're doing to yourself. I mean, there's so many times where when you're active in your disease, I look back even like before I even got sober, my, late teens, early 20s, I remember taking a picture and being like, oh, you thought you looked so good that night. And you go back and look at it and you look like such a dork, like just horrible, And so I think it was like reality set in. And so, but being able to go back, I think it was really, there was an insecurity that's there. I don't think that it was like, because it wasn't like I was, I didn't like have bulimia or anxiety, like
Yeah.
anorexia or any of that stuff. It was just more of like, it was really just around the way I looked. I was just
Yeah.
uncomfortable with it. And, but again, is how I take the power out of that and shed light on it is to talk about it. And so I was able to do what I needed to do. And, when you're taking 200, 300 milligrams of Adderall a day, it's pretty easy to cut your weight. But when you have to do it the healthy way, it takes time. Right. And so it was like, obviously it's a battle. It's just like you're grinding like this, but through that, I took affirmative action and made sure to start exercising, started to, look at what I was eating and getting appropriate amount of sleep. And, I'm the healthiest I think I've ever been right now. And it's taken a lot of hard work, and it's taken a
Yeah.
lot of time to get where I'm at. But it was real, and that was in my late what like how long was that? It was 5, 6. I mean, I was like late. I was early 30s when I was going through this. So it's like your
Mm-hmm.
metabolism hasn't really shifted. It does, but it's it was just different, and it was just a weird thing to go through because I mean, it was like my whole story. There was a lot of confidence in certain areas of my life, and there was a
Sure.
lot of insecurities, and it was like
Yeah.
this. When it came to sports or you know, relational skills or people skills, like there was a lot of confidence, but then it's like when I get with myself, there was a lot of those own insecurities, and like it's interesting because I look back at my story now, like after all these years, and I can really see where everything started and how it
Mm-hmm.
kind of manifested in different areas. But at 12, 13 years old, I was already living a double life. I had this OCD where I was washing my hands till they'd bleed. I'd have to wear neoprene gloves, at night. But then I'd go out to school and I would, hang with the popular kids, was athletic, was outgoing, all
Mm-hmm.
these things. And it was like, I was already at that age. Okay, I'm pretending to be this person, but when I go behind closed doors, mommy, I need my neoprene gloves with Neosporin on. And it was just crazy to look back. And I think those types of things manifested over the course of time with obviously insecurities around the way I perceive myself. So,
Yeah.
but took
I
a lot
think
of
it's
work.
different. It's different too when people are watching, right? Because even on the very small scale that I am with social media and the podcast and everything, it is different when everybody else is paying attention to you and what you're doing and how you look and people are commenting, like I don't know how many messages I get about what my hair looks like on a video or, whatever. Like it's crazy and it brings internally it brings a different level of awareness too. So it's like, well, damn, I've always been pretty comfortable. Like I'll rock a messy bun. Like I don't give a shit going out without makeup. Like I'm pretty comfortable with that stuff until you get 100 freaking messages of everybody else is watching what you're doing. It's like, oh, wait, maybe I need to be more conscious of this. I don't know.
Well, that's where I think it's a healthy relationship with myself. I'm at a place now where it's like, yeah, obviously, I mean, it was back then. It obviously hurt, especially when we didn't have the tools or the resources to be able to manage or walk through that. Now it's like
Sure.
I have a very healthy relationship with myself. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
it's I can look in the mirror and be very happy with who I am. And look, do
Yeah.
I have my down days? Yeah, I'm not saying I'm over here and I got this big old ego and stuff. It's just more of it's I have I like who I am today. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And it's like if you don't like me, like I spent so much of my time people pleasing, and it's like if you don't like me for who I am, you can go kick rocks. Like I'm not.
Yeah.
It's not. That's I did that for so long, and it doesn't serve you well. And on the flip side is like all that underlying and those things was I was unhappy with me. It had
Yeah.
nothing to do with other people's opinions. It was really that's what I felt about myself. You know what I mean? And so it's like until you can change that, you're not going to be able to get to the other side.
Yeah. I love that you kind of highlighted that too, the two sides of it, right? It's like you can be super confident and comfortable in certain areas of your life and still have insecurities in other areas of your life. I mean, what's the saying? Egomaniac with an inferiority complex.
I always tell
You know,
people I have an overinflated ego with an underestimated sense of self worth.
right? Yes. Yes, that
Not
sums it
anymore.
up.
Not anymore. But that's what
Um,
I think. It's having those tools, right? I knew I was going to come on a podcast with you. I was exhausted. Like this last week has been crazy with travel. I made sure to like I had the tools and the resources. I went and worked out right before we came in here. I don't care what for me mentally, I want to be mentally, emotionally, and physically present. And so like for me, it's important to just know myself, right? After being tired traveling the last, 6, 7 days and just getting back in routine, like I knew I needed to take care of myself. And so right before we did the show, like how I operate and function better is right after I go to the gym. And so I made sure to work out right before we came on here to be able to focus on just my mental health and clarity and things like that. And so it's having those tools because I didn't care what I mean, I want to be presentable, but it was also like, to me, it was prioritization, like my clarity of thought and just mentally, emotionally, and physically just being there, getting that through the gym to be able to be here is more important than me wearing a button down shirt and wearing jeans and stuff. So I don't know. It's just I wanted to share that because I just think it's for me it's where the growth is at and just having those things. Like I went after I had lunch, I was like I need to make sure I exercise, and it's having those things in place. That was not how I was 10 years ago. You know?
yeah. But those are the healthy boundaries too. I loved everything you talked about with like some of the kind of burnout around being a helping professional, because I don't think a lot of people understand how much energy that
Exhausting.
takes from you, really just being in a constant helping mode. And I've said this 1,000 times, like there are days that I feel like my life doesn't even belong to me, because it's just 1,000 phone calls and my sober houses and this thing and that thing. And like, it's a lot. And you have to have those healthy boundaries, especially for your mental health, especially if you want to stay sober. It all works together. And I had to rearrange my whole schedule to make sure that I had exercise time built into my schedule. So, because for me, it's 1,000% mental health. Exercise is how you feel. Food is how you look, really, but that exercise for me is my anxiety management. And if I don't get it, I am unwell. So I really respect that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's Dr. Amen's done a ton of research and stuff around that. I mean, how exercise is just as effective, if not more effective than SSRIs. And so, I mean, it's
yeah. There's some good research. There's some good research about that, but you don't see very many people prescribing exercise, unfortunately.
There's not. Yeah.
I wish they were.
I love it.
Okay. Final question, favorite question. What is your favorite thing about being a sober person?
Oh man, that is a loaded question.
I know,
I think the beauty and the just about being sober behind all of that is the fact that I have a life that is worth living today. I have purpose. I have passion. I have a family. I have a wife. I have kids. I have kids that I'm present in their life. I can look at you and tell you I'm a good dad. I'm a good husband. I'm a good friend. I'm a good son. I'm a good brother. I'm a good, uncle. It's given me everything I've wanted in life. And to top that off, it goes back to what I initiated and I talked about in the beginning. Like overall, when I look at this, it gave me a relationship with God, but it also allowed me the opportunity to get to understand and love who I am and understand what it is that I wanted to be able to do. When I was in active addiction, it took me away from everything. And so sobriety is been the greatest gift. And I definitely couldn't always have said that for sure. But when I really look at it, to like be at a place where like the obsession is completely lifted, to know that, drinking and drugging is not a part of my life, to know that I'm going to be one of the first people in multiple generations to raise their kids with a sober dad, like to break that cycle, is incredible. And so it's created the life that I have today. Cause trust me, I've been a part of it when I'll have 5 years again in December. And so after having 5 years relapsing, I see what it does. And I don't know that and that's the other thing too, is I don't know that I got another one in me, you know what I mean? The way that I go and use. Yeah. And so it's like, again, not that I'm even looking at that, but take it a day at a time. And I look at the beauty that sobriety has given me. Wouldn't have this, there's so much that's come from it.
It feels so good to be a good person. Cause I really when I was drunk,
I was such a
shitty person, but I didn't even think I was capable of being good. Right. I didn't even think that wasn't even on my radar. Like it wasn't even a possibility. I didn't think, someday I'm going to be a good person. I just didn't even think I was capable.
Totally agree.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Totally agree.
So good. Jason, thank you so much again for coming on and doing this with me. What a great conversation.
Oh, love it. Appreciate you and appreciate what you do.
And for everybody listening, I will link all the things Jason said he's involved in at the top of the episode. I will link all of that in the show notes so you can find out more about it.
You've reached the end of another great episode of the Addiction Unlimited podcast. Candid and honest conversation about addiction and recovery. Be sure to visit us at addictionunlimited.com to join the conversation and access show notes and links to everything we talked about. Love this episode? Please take 30 seconds to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes to help us improve and give you the information you want. Thanks for listening. See you next week.